The train slowed, with a shrill cry of metal against metal, releasing a cloud of steam into the endless sky. Caitlin O'Rourke stood near the door of the passenger car, her fingers wrapped tightly around the handle of her small suitcase. The land outside the window looked nothing like the world she had left behind. There were no crowded streets or brick buildings, only wide plains, scattered wooden structures, and a horizon that seemed to stretch forever. This was Red Willow, and somewhere in this dusty town waited the man she was supposed to marry. Caitlin took a steadying breath as she stepped onto the platform. The heat was dry, the air unfamiliar, carrying the scent of earth and livestock. Men in worn hats and boots moved about, their voices low and unhurried. She felt painfully out of place in her traveling dress, every step reminding her how far she was from home. She hadn't imagined her life turning out this way. Yet after losing her parents and her position as a lady's companion, choices had become scarce. When Caleb Hartman's advertisement arrived offering marriage, stability, and a fresh start in the West, she had answered it with cautious hope. His letters were polite and practical, filled with talk of responsibility and respect. Love was never promised, but safety was. And safety, Caitlin had decided, was enough. She scanned the platform anxiously, searching for a man who might resemble the careful handwriting she had come to know. Minutes passed, no one approached her. Then, a voice spoke behind her. Miss O'Rourke. She turned and found herself facing a man unlike any she had expected. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face tanned by sun and wind. His blue eyes were sharp but calm, and a faint scar marked his brow. He removed his hat respectfully. "My name's Wyatt Cole," he said. "Caleb asked me to meet you." A flicker of disappointment passed through her before she could stop it. "He isn't here." Wyatt shook his head. "Cattle trouble near the south fence. He didn't want you arriving alone." She nodded, masking her unease. This wasn't how she had imagined her arrival. But then again, very little about her life had gone as planned. Wyatt lifted her suitcase with ease and led her to a waiting wagon. As they rode out of town, Caitlin took in the land. The vastness of it made her feel small, yet strangely alive. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Wyatt glanced at her. "It grows on you." They rode mostly in silence, though Caitlin felt oddly aware of him, the way he handled the reins, the quiet confidence in his movements. After a moment, she spoke again. "Is Caleb kind?" Wyatt's jaw tightened just slightly. "He is a good man." That answer told her more than he likely intended. The ranch appeared as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the fields. It was sturdy and plain, built for survival rather than comfort. Caitlin stepped down from the wagon, her future suddenly very real. Wyatt set her suitcase at her feet. "You'll be safe here," he said. "Red Willow looks after its own." Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Caitlin felt something stir, something unexpected and unsettling. She quickly looked away. She hadn't come west for feelings. She had come west for a husband, and Wyatt Cole was not supposed to matter at all. Caitlin rose, with the sun, the smell of fresh coffee and wood smoke drifting through the ranch house. She tried to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. Today was the day she would meet the man she was supposed to marry, Caleb Hartman. She stood on the porch, watching the morning light stretch across the plains, when hoofbeats echoed in the distance. Her heart quickened, and she smoothed her dress, trying to seem composed. Then a figure appeared over the hill. A man solid, steady, and unfamiliar rode toward her. Caleb dismounted with careful control, his boots crunching against the dirt. He was taller than she imagined, with broad shoulders and sun-tanned skin. There was a kind, reserved quality about him, though something in his expression kept him slightly distant. He approached slowly, extending his hand. "Miss O'Rourke," he said. "I'm glad you made it safely." Caitlin hesitated before shaking his hand. "Please, call me Caitlin." He gave a small smile. "Caitlin then. I hope the journey wasn't too difficult." "It was long," she admitted. Her eyes flicked toward the barn, where Wyatt was watching silently, leaning against a post. Even standing at a distance, his presence seemed to fill the air. Caitlin looked away quickly, reminding herself that he was just a friend of her future husband. Breakfast was quiet and polite. Caleb spoke mostly of ranch business, cattle counts, pasture maintenance, and plans for winter. He detailed what she would need to know as his wife, where she should focus her attention, and how to manage household affairs. Every sentence was precise and careful. She nodded, though her chest tightened. Everything felt so measured, so proper, and yet something was missing. Wyatt offered help when Caitlin stumbled with the stove, his movements gentle, almost protective. "Here," he said, guiding her hands. "You've got to let it rest on the fire longer." "Thank you," she whispered, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. Wyatt's eyes lingered on her, and Caitlin felt the warmth of his attention. She quickly returned to stirring the pot, focusing on the rhythm of her task. She had come here to marry Caleb Hartman. That was the agreement, the contract that had guided her across the country. She would not allow herself to be distracted by the ranch hand, who seemed to know her so well already. By evening, Caleb spoke again of their upcoming wedding, his tone practical. A small ceremony, town preacher, nothing fancy, simple. Caitlin smiled politely. Of course. Wyatt excused himself shortly afterward, claiming he had chores to finish before dark. As he left, Caitlin's gaze followed him, unwilling to admit how often she had noticed him over the past 2 days. The way he moved across the barnyard, how naturally he handled the animals, the rare tenderness in his expression when he looked at her. That night, she lay awake in her new room, staring at the wooden ceiling. Her thoughts kept returning to Wyatt, the way he seemed to care without expecting anything in return. And yet, she had come here to marry Caleb Hartman. That was her duty. That was the future she had chosen. Somewhere in the quiet darkness, she knew the West had a way of testing hearts, and hers was about to face its first true trial. The trouble began quietly, as most dangerous things did in Red Willow. It started with the land neighbors disputing boundaries. Voices raised across fences and cattle wandering where they shouldn't. Caitlin had never seen Caleb so tense. His jaw was tight, his voice sharp, and his patience thinned. Every morning, he rode out to settle disagreements before they could turn violent. Wyatt rode with him when he could, but he spent most of his time patrolling the outskirts, ensuring that nothing threatened the ranch or Caitlin. The first time she saw him in the early dawn light, silhouetted against the rising sun, she realized just how much he had become part of her daily life. One stormy afternoon, the dispute turned dangerous. A rival rancher's men crossed the boundary and fired a warning shot near the east pasture. Wyatt was there in an instant, drawing Caleb back and keeping the men at bay. Caitlin, watching from the window, felt her heart stop as the clouds thundered above them and rain pelted the earth. Wyatt returned later, soaked to the bone, his shoulder bleeding from a stray scratch. Caitlin rushed to him, wrapping towels around the wound, hands trembling with fear. "You should have stayed inside," she scolded, though her voice shook. He gave a small, grim smile. "And let them threaten you. Never." She felt warmth bloom inside her chest, despite the fear. There was a protective strength about him, a loyalty so absolute it frightened her. That night, as the storm raged on, Wyatt remained near the house, unwilling to leave her side. The lamplight flickered across the room, and for a moment, their eyes met. Caitlin wanted to look away, to remind herself that she had come west to marry Caleb, not fall for his best friend. "I shouldn't feel like this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Wyatt shook his head. "Neither should I." The air between them was heavy with unspoken words. She saw it in the way he watched, her careful, attentive. Yet long in Gand, she realized she had been drawn to him, long before she understood it. The next morning, Caleb returned from negotiations. He was unharmed, but exhausted, the lines of responsibility etched into his face. Caitlin felt guilt prick her heart. She had begun to notice Wyatt in ways she couldn't deny, and now she carried the weight of divided loyalty. "Wyatt," Caleb said quietly, "make sure she stays out of the line of fire today." Wyatt nodded without question. Always. As the day wore on, Caitlin worked alongside him, tending to horses and repairing fences. Every gesture, every word, carried the subtle intimacy of shared understanding. And yet, each time she caught herself smiling at him, she forced her thoughts back to Caleb, the man she was supposed to marry. But in the West, choices were never easy, and hearts were rarely obedient. Caitlin could feel the storm brewing, not just in the skies above, but in her own chest. She had crossed an ocean and a continent, seeking stability. What she had found instead was something far more complicated. A loyalty and a love she could neither ignore nor claim openly. By sunset, the prairie glowed gold, and Caitlin stood on the porch, her gaze following Wyatt as he rode out to check the northern fence. Her pulse was heavy, her mind conflicted. She had come west for a husband, and yet she had begun to care for someone she was not meant to love. The West had a way of testing hearts, and Caitlin realized she would soon have to decide between duty, safety, and the desire that had quietly claimed her. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of smoke and wet earth. Caitlin had barely begun her chores when the distant crack of a rifle echoed across the plains. Her heart jumped, and she dropped the bucket she was carrying. Horses whinnied, startled by the sound, and the wind seemed to carry an urgent warning. Wyatt was already moving, mounting his horse with swift precision. "Stay inside," he called, but Caitlin didn't listen. Fear sharpened her senses, and she ran after him, refusing to let him face danger alone. By the time she reached the pasture, she saw Caleb and Wyatt riding toward the eastern fence line, dust rising behind them. Her stomach tightened. Shots rang again, closer this time, and Wyatt stumbled slightly in the saddle. She froze as she realized he had been hit. Panic surged through her. Without thinking, she ran toward him, Caleb shouting for her to wait. Wyatt fell from the saddle, blood staining his shirt, and Caitlin's heart caught in her throat. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands to the wound, trembling. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, though her voice wavered. Her tears fell freely, soaking his sleeve. "I won't let anything happen to you." Wyatt's hand found hers, weak but insistent. "Didn't mean for this," he murmured, his voice faint. Caleb helped lift him, his face pale but calm. "She's good with her hands," he said quietly. "You'll live, Wyatt." Through the night, Caitlin stayed by his side, tending to him with quiet determination. She bathed his brow, cleaned his wounds, and whispered prayers she hadn't spoken in years. Wyatt drifted in and out of consciousness, and each time his eyes opened, he searched for her. In the dim lamplight, she realized the truth she could no longer deny. Her heart had already made its choice, whether she wanted it to or not. Caleb noticed too. At one point, he spoke quietly from the doorway. "I see it now. You love him." Caitlin's breath caught. She couldn't speak, couldn't argue, couldn't deny it. Caleb continued, his voice calm but heavy with understanding. "I know it isn't what you came for. It isn't what anyone planned. But love. Love cannot be dictated by letters or contracts." Tears streamed down Caitlin's face as she whispered, "I never intended. I didn't mean for it to happen." Caleb shook his head gently. "I know. That's why I release you." Her eyes widened. "Caleb, you deserve to choose," he said softly, "not be forced by duty or obligation." The weight in Caitlin's chest lifted slightly. She had come west for stability, for safety, for a life someone else had arranged. But what she had found here, through fear, danger, and shared moments of quiet courage, was far more precious. She looked down at Wyatt, his breathing even now, sweat and blood streaking his shirt. Yet the same strong blue eyes she had already come to love, looking at her with trust and unspoken longing. By dawn, Caitlin knew the West had given her a gift she could never ignore. A chance to choose her own heart, and she would not waste it. The morning sun spilled gold across the prairie, painting the ranch in a warm, forgiving light. Wyatt stirred on the cot where Caitlin had spent the night, careful to keep his shoulder bandaged and supported. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was her hair catching the sunlight, her hand resting lightly atop his. "You're awake," Caitlin whispered, relief spilling through her voice. "Seems." "I am," Wyatt replied, a small, rough smile tugging at his lips. "And you stayed here all night?" "Of course," she said softly. "I wasn't going anywhere." They sat together in quiet, the world beyond the ranch fading for a moment into stillness. The events of the past days, the land dispute, the shots, the storm, and the fear, had revealed something neither could ignore: the loyalty they both felt to Caleb, and to the life she had once planned, clashed violently with what their hearts truly wanted. Wyatt's voice broke the silence. "Caleb, he said you had a choice." Caitlin nodded. "He did, and I had to listen to my own heart, not a promise on paper." Wyatt's blue eyes searched hers. "And what did you choose?" Her fingers brushed his. "I choose you, Wyatt. I choose us. I choose the life I never expected, but one I know I want." A rush of emotions, relief, joy, fear, and longing, flashed across Wyatt's face. "I promise," he said, voice low and steady. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." By the time Caleb arrived later that day, the decision had been made, and the tension that might have lingered was gone. He looked at them, and there was understanding in his eyes, rather than bitterness. "You've made your choice," Caleb said quietly. "I can see it. Take care of each other. And take care of the ranch, too." Wyatt met his gaze. "I will, I swear it." Caitlin felt a rush of gratitude for Caleb's wisdom, for the man who had seen the truth and released her without bitterness. She knew that the West was full of harsh choices, but also of courage, and Caleb had shown both. Weeks passed, and Wyatt healed under her care. Together, they worked the ranch, tending to cattle, repairing fences, and riding the endless plains side by side. The bond between them strengthened, built on shared trials, quiet laughter, and trust forged in danger. Their wedding was simple, held beneath the open sky where the prairie stretched endlessly behind them. There were no grand decorations, no borrowed finery, only the two of them. The vows they spoke plain and true, and the warm glow of the setting sun as witness. As Wyatt took Caitlin's hands in his belt, she felt the full weight of her journey, the miles she had traveled, the fear she had endured, the love that had grown unexpectedly. She had arrived in the West, seeking security. She had stayed because she had found something far rarer: love chosen freely, with courage and conviction. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying a promise of tomorrow, and the promise of many days together. Caitlin looked into Wyatt's eyes, seeing the steadfast devotion reflected there. And she knew that the West, with all its trials and beauty, had given her more than she could have ever imagined. And this time, the choice was entirely hers. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western Story.